This week, Parshas Terumah on 444. Now, we're going to begin now what very often people who start with Parsha classes will tell you are a set of difficult Parshas because you don't have any story. And you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and Moshe, and Paro, and all these stories you can talk about, and they're real easy to discuss and to teach ethical lessons. But now we get to this Parsha that appears to be a bit dry. It talks about, objects and things and putting things in the Mishkan and building supplies and donating building supplies, and it's really there's not as much to be able to very simply tell you a story and to tell you, the ethics of how it affects us in our life. However, this is the beauty of the Torah itself, because the Torah is written on many levels. There's a simple level, which is you read the story and you learn from the story, right? It'll say that God created the world on this day and he did this on this day, and that's pretty straightforward. And Abraham went to this place and that place. But then you'll get to something like this, which talks about all of the things that were needed to donate in order to build the traveling temple in the desert, and why they had to build a traveling temple in the desert. And this concept, right, on a simple level, it teaches you something, but for most people who aren't engineers, it doesn't seem to be all that exciting. But really, now we're going to see how the Torah, on a deeper level, also speaks to us, and that it can say one thing, and it means that one thing, but then you can start going into the words, and you can find another 70 interpretations, or another 69 interpretations of it, and that are all true. So we're going to see some of that here, and for the next few weeks we're going to have to look at the Torah on a little bit of a deeper level than we usually do, in order to get the meanings that applies to the approach that we've been taking here, which is how the Torah affects me in my life today. So this Parshas Terumah, first thing, according to most commentaries, is out of order historically. The Torah is not a book of history, but the Torah contains history. But because it's not considered a book of history, it's not necessarily all in order. You can have something happen in the Torah that's written in the Torah that you come to conclude, right, actually happens later on, or it happened earlier, but it's for some reason out of order. Now, there is reasons that it's out of order. God purposely does that to teach us a number of things, different things each time. And it appears that this parsha is out of order. And the reason is because this parsha deals with all the objects that have to be donated to the Mishkan. The Mishkan is a traveling temple, like the Beis HaMikdash, which is in Jerusalem, is the stationary temple that the Jews would use. But as they traveled to the desert, they used a thing called the Mishkan, which they're modeled after each other. They're very similar. The objects are similar. The placement of everything is similar. But this is the travel version, and it was created first. And the Jews took this throughout the desert. But the purpose was the same. And it tells us in the Talmud that the reason that the Jews needed to build this Mishkan, a place to go meet God, to hear from God, to pray to God, to offer sacrifices in God, instead of God being everywhere and having the ability wherever you are to do that, was because of the sin of the golden calf. The sin of the golden calf was actually, Moshe comes down the mountain, right? It says that he seems that the Jews thought that he was late. They actually thought that he wasn't coming, that something had happened to him. He was gone for 40 days and 40 nights, and they thought something must have happened. They became afraid, and therefore they went and they worshipped a calf, which was a god in Egypt. It's a frame of reference that they had from being in Egypt for so long. And of course, that's a terrible thing. Here they just went through all of these miracles, right? These enormous miracles, and then Moshe goes up to get the Torah, and they hear God's voice, and they see everything happening. And then after all of this, all the 10 plagues, the splitting of the Red Sea, the going out of Egypt, the coming to get the Torah, to seeing the actual giving of the Torah, and then to go and just say, we're going to go worship an idol, right, is a very odd thing. But clearly you see the fear that they had. They were a people who had been slaves for so long that they almost, they lost their self-worth. They're only able to live because Moshe would lead them. Now they're afraid Moshe's dead. So they immediately go back to a frame of reference from Egypt, and they worship the god of Egypt, which is the calf. Now, immediately, of course, before this gets too far, Moshe comes down the mountain, and the Jews had miscalculated, and Moshe smashes the Ten Commandments. Right? We're going to hear that whole story in a couple weeks. And the result of it is that among the other things that happen, one of them is that no longer are the Jews on the level that they can interact with God on a high spiritual level wherever they are, in their own homes, on the street, anywhere. They now have this, they lose this ability, and they now are going to be able to interact with God on that high level, but only in a place designated, like in the temple. So therefore they had to create, at God's insistence and God's direction, the Mishkan, the temple. Right? Now, why this is out of order is that here they're teaching us all about this temple that they're building in the desert called the Mishkan, but we haven't had the story of the golden calf yet. Right? And this is the result of the golden calf. So you see that this is out of order. We're going to have in a couple weeks, it's going to tell us the story of the golden calf. So really the order was that Moshe went up the mountain, Moshe receives the Torah, he's supposed to come down on the 40th day. The Jews see the 40th day has begun, he doesn't show up. They get afraid, they are searching for answers. A group of them go and worship this calf. Moshe arrives down later the same day when he said he would come. He sees what they're doing. He breaks the Ten Commandments. God wants to kill the Jews, wants to destroy them for this. He says that's enough already. Like after all that I did for them, they go back to worshiping idols immediately. One problem, and the Jews are saying basically, what have you done for us lately? Because it's been a few days since you did a miracle for us. So they worship this golden calf, and the result is that the spiritual level goes down. Right? That's really how it happens. So here we're learning about the effect of something that happened, but it doesn't relate that story to us for a few more weeks. So you see that this parsha is out of order, there's numerous reasons for that, but one that the Talmud tells us that the reason that it's out of order is that the Talmud tells us that God always creates the cure for a sickness before he creates the sickness. That is, if you can talk on a physical level, that if human beings start acquiring a physical sickness, right, something starts happening, a plague, any type of sickness, even, God forbid, cancer or any other sicknesses that people get, before God allows the sickness into the world to affect people, he creates the cure for it. Now, he doesn't necessarily tell us the cure, but there is a cure. Now, that's on a physical level. On a spiritual level also, we have this idea that before we're tested in any type of spiritual challenge, God already knows and has already given us the strength to pass the challenge. We can do it. We just don't know it. But whatever that is, that we can have, money problems, we can have family problems, we can have social problems, we can have illnesses, we can feel depressed, whatever it is, and God has already designated the cure for this. We just have to find the cure, or we have to believe that he's made the cure so that we can work towards acquiring it. This is an example of that, because what's happened is that God creates the Mishkan, which is basically the cure for the spiritual flaw that was created by worshiping the calf. So we read about the Mishkan first, even though it happens later, in order to tell us that God always creates the cure before he creates the sickness. And it's, you might think, well, it's a very nice concept, but it's actually a concept that affects us all. Because as we live our lives, and we're challenged in many ways, every one of us are, there's difficult things in our lives. There's divorces, and there's deaths, and there's bankruptcies, and there's interfighting between friends and family that aren't getting along, and all kinds of things are happening. And there's challenges just to get up in the morning sometimes, and challenges you don't feel well. Whatever the case is, we have to know that when God gives us a challenge, he won't give us a challenge unless he knows that we can pass it, we can accomplish it. Otherwise, that would be cruel, and God is not cruel. Right? If God would give us a challenge that we could not win, we could not pass, then that would be cruel. and He's not that way. So every challenge He gives us, we can surpass. We can accomplish it. If we're having problems with our children, God makes it possible for us that we can fix those problems. We may not want to. We may think it's too hard, but we can. And that's what's happening here. First, we have the cure for the worshiping of the calf. Then they worship the calf. Now, they didn't know that, of course. We know that because we have the Torah. That we have the same thing in our lives. So that whenever we're challenged, no matter what that challenge is, we know that we can always surpass that challenge. We always can get through it. It's just a matter of are we using our abilities, our strength, our faith, and sometimes help of others. Right? Sometimes, I find that when I do counseling, which is a very large part of what I do, and what I did even before I was working in a congregation, is that most of the times when Jewish people come to me with problems, what will happen is that they'll have 5 or 6 problems in different areas. They'll be having problems with their children, and then they'll be having money problems, and then they'll have, let's say, a problem with something at work, and then their car won't start. Right? All of these things happen, all totally separate, but they're all happening at the same time. And what happens is they all get confused in our brain. Now we have all of these things going on at the same time, and it becomes overwhelming. When any one of those problems we could deal with, even 2 of them we could deal with, but when we get 4 or 5 at one time, and we start seeing that the answer to one problem causes the other problem to get worse, we get confused, right? And then a counselor's job, I've always found this, right, the type of counseling that I studied in graduate school, is that the job of the counselor is to help you separate the problems and to deal with each one at a time, and then you're able to surpass it. Right? I'm giving you this as an example to show you that one of the things that sometimes we need to do in order to pass our challenges is to seek assistance from someone else. We can't always help ourselves. In fact, the Talmud says no man can let themselves out of jail. No one can let yourself out of jail. What that's saying to us is when you're having a problem, it's like you're in jail. Right? And it's not possible always to be able to fix all your problems yourself. Sometimes you need to go to a counselor, to a rabbi, to a psychologist, to a psychiatrist, to a physical doctor, right? Because you have physical ailments. Sometimes you need just a friend. But we often need things, and it's not a sign of weakness. When we have all of these challenges, that's what happens. And that's when God creates the cure, is that God has given us not only the answer to each one of our 5 problems, we just don't know them. He's also given us a vehicle to come up with a way of finding out the answers so that we can achieve it. And we just have to be big enough to allow ourselves to do it. Sometimes it's hard for us to admit to others, that we need help. It's difficult, especially if sometimes it's somebody who's your child or a doctor or someone else. That for a person, myself even, to have to admit that I feel depressed. But it happens in my work that if you get, you help people, you try to help people, and they come in with their problems, if you really feel for the people, it's almost like you feel you have the problem. And I have that happen to me often, where people will come in that this happened to them and this happened to them. And if I have 3 or 4 people in a day, and then I have that 2 or 3 days a week, and that goes on for 5, 6 weeks, it is to me, it's really like this, but it feels like this, that all of these problems are mine. And suddenly I've got 30 big problems that I have to deal with, and you get depressed. Right? Physically, you get literally depressed, and you have to get help. So I have to go seek assistance. I have to go to someone who can talk me through it, just like the people who come to me, and I help them talk them through it, because it helps. I had to be able to admit that even though I can help other people, that I can't always help myself. I sometimes need other people to help me. That's one of the things we learn from this idea. So now that we got the basic outline of it, let's look into the parsha itself, take a look at some of the things that it says. So it begins by saying, Vaydaber Hashem LaMoshe Lemor, which is, of course, our opening line over and over. And what does he tell him? Daber B'nai Yisrael. God says to Moshe, tell this to the Jewish people. Vayichu li truma me'ez kol isha sheyidbanu libo tichu es trumasi. So it says, take for me truma. What is truma? The translation says, he says a portion. But truma usually means a portion for charitable purposes. Right? You have 100 oranges, you have to give one to the Kohen, that's Terumah. You have to give 2 to the Kohen, that's Terumah. You have to give 10% of your money, that's a word for that is tzedakah, another word is Terumah. Okay? So God is saying, take for me Terumah from every person whose heart speaks to them, you shall take my Terumah. So there's a number of problems with this, but they're very, very important ones. First thing it says, it doesn't say, give me Terumah, which is how it should be. If I go to you and I say, you have to give me 10% of your profit. I'll invest in your company, but you have to give me 10%. I don't say, okay, I'll invest in your company, but you have to take for me 10%. Doesn't make sense. Take for me. You have to give to me, right? You have it, I get it. Give to me. But here God is saying, you shall take for me this charity, this money for holy purposes. Take it for me. And who do you take it from? Everyone. Okay. But it doesn't say just everyone. Everyone whose heart speaks to them. That comes to tell you that if their heart doesn't speak to them, you don't take from them. That means if a person's stingy, you don't take money from them. Don't take a portion from them. That can't be what it means. Because God is not going to say you should only take this from people who want to give. You take this, it's an obligation. Like we have an obligation. You have to give Meiser. Meiser means 10%. You have to give 10% of your income to charity. It doesn't say you have to give 10% if you want to. It says you have to give 10%. Right? So for it to say here, go to each person who wants to do it, right? Asher davenu libo, whose heart speaks to him, right? He wants to do it. That can't be the case. So what is this really telling us? So first thing, take from me Terumah has numerous meanings. First, what it means is that you are giving to me Terumah, but you are getting much more than you're giving. You're going to. Here's what God's saying. I'm going to give you a salary of $100,000 this year. I want you to take 10% of that money. I want you to give it for Terumah, for charity, to someone else. Right? You have to give 10% of your money to the poor. Right? So you make $100,000. God says you give $10,000. You give $10,000 to someone else who's poor. That's charity. That's 10% of our money. That's what we're all obligated to do. This of our 10% of our income for that year. So God says you're going to give 10% to the poor. What will the poor get? He can buy a sandwich. You make $100 today. You give him $10. He can buy food now. He can go buy a sandwich. What does he get? A sandwich. What do you get? You get eternity. You get a promise from God that you are fulfilling my will. You are doing a mitzvah. You will receive eternal reward from God for giving this. Right? Your reward is much greater than their reward. Now that you can believe me or not, but I'll tell you one thing: you don't have to believe me. If you go and you make $100 today, and you go to somebody who needs money and you give them $10, you're going to feel that you've done something very good. You feel it yourself. You feel it inside of you. Now you feel pity for that person. That's not tzedakah. That's not a Jewish idea. You feel. Now you feel a part of that person, right? That person takes that $10 and they now put it towards their rent, and now they can stay in their house, and now their children have a place to sleep. Right? Let's say you gave them $500. Now you paid their rent for them, or a portion of their rent. Now their children have a place they can sleep. Their children have a place to sleep because of you. Now you feel an attachment to them and their children. So who actually gained more? They had a place to sleep, but you have this feeling of a relationship, a bond with someone else. You received much more. Now you receive much more also spiritually, that God is going to reward you for this. Not only that, God promises you when you give charity, He's going to pay you back. It says that when you do a mitzvah, God makes it easier if you do the mitzvah. Again. So if you do the mitzvah of charity because you made $100 today and you give $10 to someone, God says, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to make it so you can not only give that another $10, I'm going to make it so you can give $15. Because I saw you gave 10, I'm going to reward you so you can do another mitzvah and you can do it again. So in order for you to give $15 of charity, you have to make $150. You can't just make $100. So suddenly you get a raise. Suddenly you have found money that you didn't expect. Your money increases. That idea is God giving you, right? So you are now gaining not only a spiritual reward, not only the feeling that you have an attachment from one Jew to another, but you are actually increasing your physical income by doing that. So that's why it says, take from me truma. Because, yes, you're giving truma, but you're taking much more than you're giving. And that's what God wants us to understand. The second thing is, how is it that you can give something to God? Because in reality, God owns it all. God owns everything here. Right? If you have a child, that child's your child, right? That child does something bad, you're responsible. That child does something good, you're responsible. If a child needs sneakers, you got to buy them. I don't got to buy sneakers for your kid. You got to buy sneakers for your kid, right? It's your child because you created them. Well, God created the world, and He created all of us. So He's responsible, right? Ultimately, God's responsible, and everything is His. We are owned by Him, right? Just like your child is owned by you, so to speak, we are owned by God. Right? In the same way, if your child needs sneakers, you got to buy them, not me. If I need sneakers, God ultimately has to provide for me, because I'm God's, just like we're all God's, right? Everything in this world is God. So if God owns everything already, how are we giving Him something? If God owns all of the apples in the world, which He does, because He owns everything, so how do I give Him 10% of my apples? They're His apples. I'm giving Him 10% of His apples. Thanks a lot, right? God's got $100 in His bank account, and I go and take $10 from His bank account and give it to Him. So, what kind of a gift is that? It was His money in the first place. So how are you giving something to God? You can't. So that's why He says take. He says, I'm giving you permission. Take my money, which you think is your money, and give me 10% of it. Let's see if you can do that. I'm going to give you a gift of $100. I want you to give me $10 back. A lot of us don't do it. We don't give God $10 back. We say, God gave me $100. It's my $100. God says, no, I want $10 back. So here He's saying, I'm giving you the ability, right, take this money so you can give some back. So that's why it uses the word take instead of give. The next is, why does it say, from every person whose heart speaks to Him? Because since God owns everything already, it's all His money, it's all His objects, it's all His things, and so then when it says you go to each person to give to me, it's already His, it's already God's. He already owns it. So when it says you should give, that they should have it in their heart, it means that that person has a feeling of gratitude to God, and he wants to give to God. I feel gratitude to God. I woke up today. I feel gratitude that I feel good today. I know what it's like not to feel good one day, and how hard it is simply to make breakfast in the morning when you don't feel good, to get up and go somewhere, to talk on the phone when you don't feel good. I feel good. I have gratitude to God that I feel good. God gave me a job where I make $1 million a year. I feel so much gratitude to God for that. Not because I'm working hard and get $1 million. That's not why, because I work hard. But God's giving me $1 million a year in my job. I'm going to give Him $100,000. Right? That's my gratitude. I'm showing thanks to God for doing it. If my heart does not show thanks to God, then I'm not going to give it. Right? So it's telling you, God says, I know this is all mine, but I want you to do it. It's like you do with a child. You go to a child, and the child wants a candy, and they're with a friend. So you give your child 2 candies, and you say, I want you to take one for you, and give one to your friend. And you're testing them, right? Because like a 3-year-old has a lot of trouble doing that. It's hard. You give them 2 pieces of candy, I have 2 pieces of candy now. Even if you told me I can have this one, if I give this one to my friend, it doesn't matter. I have 2 pieces now. That's how a child thinks. A child doesn't have the ability to conceive this, but you as the parent have to teach them how to grow up and to share and to give and to participate and to understand ownership and understand charity, right? You have to teach the child that. So you give the child 2 pieces of candy, and you say, you can have this one if you give this one to your friend, right? It's a challenge for them. Eventually they do it, and that's what God's saying to us. God's saying, here's $100,000. If your heart is such that you can be a big enough person, that you show gratitude, you give me back $10,000 that I will use for the poor. That's what God is saying to us. It's not really that God is saying only those who want to give. Everyone has to give, but only those who want to give, right, are really giving. The others aren't really giving. It's just my money anyways. You're just taking my money and putting it back in my account. It's just like, I have times I'll go to the bank, and some of my kids because I used to send them money regularly, what I did is I opened up bank accounts under my bank account, and they would have a card wherever they are in the world, and I would just transfer money from my account to their account, and they could take it out wherever they were. But it was their account, but it's really my account, right? I'm paying the fees. The government sees it as my account. It's just a vehicle to be able to get the money, right? It's not their money. But if I put $100 in that account, all I've done is move money from my checking account to my other checking account. My other checking account, they have access to. That's why I put it there. But it's not theirs. It's really mine. I'm giving it to them. So if I say, I go to the bank and I give the bank a check for $1,000, and by mistake they put my $1,000 in that account, it's my account, right? They just put it in the second one instead of the first one, right? It happens. It's happened many times. So suddenly my son will be sitting in Jerusalem, and he gets an email. He's got $1,000 in his account. Hey, $1,000. Right? You know, my prayers came true, right? So I call him up. Listen, there's a problem. The bank took my paycheck, put it in your account by mistake. I need you to transfer it back. Now, does he transfer it back? Does he? It's his money now. It's in his account. It's not even his account. It's my account. But he thinks it's his account. Not only it's not his account, it's not his money either. It's my money. And not only that, he only got it because they made a mistake. Now, is he going to give me the money back or not? They're going to have a challenge. They're going to think, maybe only for a second, I should keep this money. Right? They wouldn't do it. They're honest. Right? But still, it crosses your mind. That's exactly what's going on here. God gives you the money, and he says, okay, I gave you this money, but it's really my money. Okay? But give me 10% back, okay? If God really needed the 10%, he would just give us 10% less. He doesn't need it. He wants to teach us to give. So that's why it says, anybody whose heart speaks to him should take from me my Terumah. All right? That's the idea. And then it goes on. So it says, Zosa Terumah asher tichu mitchem. This is the Terumah that you have taken for me. And then, now you watch the words in English. I'll read it in English in verse 3. What is it that God asks for us? He asks gold, silver, copper, turquoise, purple, scarlet wool, linen and goat hair, red-dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for anointment oil, and the aromatic incense, shoham stones and stones for the settings for the ephod and the breastplate. Right? These are all of the objects that are needed, right, in order to build the Mishkan. Well, these are not all of them. There's going to be more, but this is all of these are objects that are needed. And if you look at it closely, you'll notice something. It's a hierarchy. The most expensive thing is first. Gold, silver, copper, right? We know that gold's more expensive than silver, right? An ounce of gold is more than an ounce of silver. An ounce of silver is more than an ounce of copper. An ounce of copper is more than an ounce of wool. Right? An ounce of wool, blah, 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 going all the way down, right, is more than spices. Spices is more than oil. Oil is more than incense, right? But then you get to the end, and they have these stones for the ephod and the breastplate. These are precious stones, right? It's out of order. It's like I'm saying gold, silver, right? Gold, silver, copper, wool, diamonds. I'm out of order. It should be diamonds, gold, silver, copper, wool, right? But God does 9 things in order, and suddenly, boom, at the end, he puts in something that's out of order. Right? So why is that? The fact is it is in order, but we're looking at it wrong. We're looking at this as the worth, the physical worth of the objects. So I'll have to tell you a story. What happens as this story goes on is that the Jews all donate these things. In fact, they donate more than is what's needed. They give the gold and the silver and the wool, and they give the skins, and they give the incense, and they give the stones. They give everything. But if you look closely, you'll notice that the Jewish people themselves gave everything except the stones. They gave the gold and the silver and everything but the stones. And there was one group who didn't give anything. This group were very special people. They said, right at the beginning, they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make your life easy. Go to the Jewish people, ask them for all these things. Whatever they don't give you, we'll give you. Whatever they don't give, you don't have to worry about it. Imagine you want to build a building for your charity, right? Our shul wants to make a building. So I go to a donor, I say, can you give us $50,000, I'll name the sanctuary for you. And he says, forget that. Here's what I'll do. You go out and raise all your money. anything you're short, $1 or $1,000,000, I'll pay it. You don't worry. You go do your best to raise the money, but you don't have to stay up at night worrying. If you don't raise enough, I'll take care of it. Isn't that a great thing? It is. It's also a problem. That's what the princes did, the head of each tribe. They said, God, you go let the great unwashed, let the regular people donate everything. We're the princes. We'll be there at the end. Whatever they don't give, we'll give. Okay? So they went and they gave. Right? Everything was given, and then it turns out the stones hadn't been given. So it says the princes had to give the stones. But the princes, the Medrash says, didn't have any stones. Where are they supposed to get diamonds, rubies, sapphires? In the desert. Where are they going to get that? Right? They didn't have it. So it says that God sent on clouds the precious stones, and they were brought there, and the princes gathered them together and donated them. So now I'll ask you, we were looking at this list and we were saying gold is worth more than silver, and silver is worth more than copper. That's true. Now let's look at it from the feeling of the owner. How much am I giving of myself? Like if I'm a multi-billionaire and you ask me for $500,000, I could give it to you and I wouldn't feel it, right? If I have I'm a regular person and I make a normal salary and you ask me for $500, I might give it to you, but I'll feel it. I'll know it, right? But $500,000, the rich guy doesn't feel. $500, I feel, right? So if he gives $500,000, I give $500. Who did more? He physically did more, but I emotionally did more, right? So now we'll look at it. So the people gave gold and silver and copper. We're not talking about how much it's worth. We're talking about how much it's worth to God. How much effort did the people put in to give it? So the regular guy, right, who has some gold, who goes to his wife and says, listen, they need gold for the temple. Do me a favor, give me your earrings. I know you love the earrings, and I gave them to you for our anniversary. Let's use your earrings for the temple. And so she gives them. Is she giving up a lot? Yeah. Is he giving up? Yeah. They're giving up a lot, right? So the Torah is telling us we're going to do this in hierarchy of how much effort you put in. The greatest effort was when they gave the gold, then the silver, then the copper. The least amount of effort was the diamonds, because God just gave that to the princes, because the princes blew it. They blew it. It's the only reason that they could say that that we're big shots, we're going to cover your deficit, is if there could be a deficit. But they were presuming that the Jews were going to be stingy, and they're not going to give, and there'll be a deficit, so we'll be the big shots. But the Jews weren't stingy. The Jews were kind-hearted, so they gave. There was no deficit, so they had nothing to give. There was nothing left. They couldn't participate. So God, who needed the stones as well, sent them the stones for free to show them what you did was actually not a good thing. You presumed that my people would not give. And the fact that they gave meant that you lost out. You didn't participate. You couldn't participate. So I'm going to give you this, but I want you to know you're in the bottom of the ladder. Right? You want to, if we all want to get together and we want to build a synagogue, right, tell me now how much you're going to give. You're going to give me $100, $10, $1? That's it. You did it. You're a part of it, right? It's not how much, it's that you did it. Right? The fact that you say, don't worry, come to me later. Well, there is no later, because everybody else gave. It was done. That's what it's telling us here. That's why it's in that order. And you'll see it more later. We then have a very important statement, the last line on this page, on 444 and 445, which is quoted all the time. And it says, Ve'asu li mikdash v'shechanti b'socha. Verse 8. Make for me a sanctuary so I shall dwell among them. I told you before that at this time in history, since the Jews sinned, they could no longer have like a sanctuary everywhere. Now they had to create a sanctuary, a place to go, because the spirituality went down because of the sin of the golden calf. So God says, you have to make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell within the sanctuary, right? But that's not what it says. It says, Asuli mikdash, make for me a sanctuary. V'shechanti b'socham. It should say, V'shechanti b'socha, and I will dwell within it, right? Which is what he's trying to say. Make a temple, make a building for me, and I'll be in the building. Why else are you going to make a building for me if I'm not going to be in it, right? That's not what it says. It says, make for me a temple, and I will live among you. I will be among you. So what it's telling us is, on a simple level, make me a temple, and you'll come to the temple, and I'll be among you. But on a deeper level, it's saying, you make yourself into a temple. Make yourself holy. Make yourself a good person, a caring, loving, right, observant person, and I will dwell in you. I'll be with you everywhere you go. You'll never be alone. You're never going to be somewhere in a dark place where you don't know how to get out. I will always be with you, and no matter what troubles and pain and problems you have, I'm with you. And the darkest day and the hardest problem you have and the most troubles you have in your life, I'm with you. You're never alone. Make for me a temple. Make yourself, right, into the best you can be, and I'll be there with you. That's what he's saying to us. And so God is saying, I'm not going to leave the Jewish people because of the sin of the golden calf. You're going to have to relate to me a little differently now. So now you're going to have to make a temple. And now you're going to have to make yourself a temple. You're going to have to be like a holy person. You're a holy person, I'll be there with you, wherever you are. That's a very important thing. It's telling us, number one, which is different than some religions, God is with you wherever you go. God's not just in the synagogue. God's not just in the mosque or in the church. God's with you everywhere, wherever you go. You don't have to go to synagogue in order to talk to God. Yeah, God is there. And yes, there is a certain emotional and reality to the fact that God's presence is in the synagogue because it's a communal area. But he's also in your house. He's also in your kitchen. He's also in your dining room. He's also in your car driving somewhere. He's with you wherever you go. Not just there, but he is there too. So make a temple. And if you're having trouble, go to the temple. Go to the synagogue. And open up the ark and pray and let your tears go. But you'll also be effective if you sit into your kitchen and you cry there. And you call out to God there, because he's with you there too. He's with you wherever you are. And that's what that's saying. So it's not like, sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll always, want to tell me, I'm religious, I'm not religious. So I'll say to them, ask a question. Are you a religious person? So they'll say, no, I don't go to synagogue. Right? Now that answer is actually not a correct answer. It's not. It's, if I would ask somebody from another religion, right, like let's say a Protestant person, I'd say, and I don't mean that this is necessarily theologically correct according to Protestants, but this is how the average person like that I grew up with, there was a Protestant used to answer me. I'd say, are you religious? And I don't go to church. Why? Because the definition of religious is going to church. If you don't go to church, you're not religious. If you go to church, you are religious. Now, I'm not simplifying. I am simplifying their religion, but you hear this all the time. I heard it when I was growing up. Right? I lived in a neighborhood with Catholics. It was Catholics and Jews. We all lived together, and you would ask them, "Tell me, are you a religious Catholic?" No, I don't go to church. That's what they'd say. If you'd say, "Are you a religious Jew?" I don't go to school. Right? It's a mistake for us to say that, because our definition of being a religious Jew does not mean you go to shul. Yes, a religious Jew goes to shul, but is it possible to be a religious Jew who doesn't go to shul? What if you live somewhere where there is no shul? For whatever reason, you're living somewhere by yourself, and there's no shul. Or you have a new community, and they haven't built a shul. So, are you religious? Yeah. Because you build inside of yourself a synagogue, build inside of yourself a holy place, I'll be there with you. God is with us in the shul. God's also with us wherever we are. So therefore, the definition of a Jew is not that they go to shul. It's not. That doesn't make us religious. Yeah, going to shul has a lot of pluses. Look, it's my livelihood. I'm not going to tell you not to go to shul or I'll be in trouble. But going to shul is not the essence of Judaism. Yeah, it's important. But, if you had the ability, the fact is you can pray at home. You don't have to pray in shul. But you need a school. You can't, right, to educate your children. You need a mikvah. You need a butcher market that has kosher meat. Right? But and you need a shul. But whatever you do in a shul, you can do at home. You can do it, right? So understand that a shul is not the essence of Judaism, because this quote tells you that you make yourself holy, and whatever you do in a shul, I will be there with you. You don't need the shul. You do need it, but it's not a requirement. You see how I'm saying it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then he goes on. Now he's going to go into all of the various things that go into the temple, and the first thing we talk about is the Aron. The Aron is the ark, where they kept the Torah, the Ten Commandments. They kept many objects. We have one in our synagogue, right? We keep the Torahs, the ark. So he said, so what is it? What is the original ark? How is it supposed to look? What's it made out of? We'll read it in English, beginning in verse 10. You shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, 1.5 cubits its height. So here you have it. It's 2.5 long, 1.5 wide, and 1.5 high, right? So it's longer than it's high, and it's longer than it's wide. Okay? You'll cover it with gold from within and from without. So what you have is wood, this special wood, acacia wood, that has gold on the inside of it and gold on the outside. It's gold plated, right, on both sides. And then you make the ark. Now, the first thing we have to wonder is, like, why would God want that? What's the message? Because this is all talking to us, right? We're not making an ark, but he's saying something to you and me. What is he saying to us? By saying, you take a piece of wood, right, and this is going to be the holiest object in the temple. You take a piece of wood, put gold inside of it, and put gold outside of it. And then you're going to make it into a box, and you're going to put the Torah and the Ten Commandments and manna is always going to go inside of this ark, right? Just like we have our ark, that ark. So what is the message that it's saying? There's gold on the outside, gold on the inside, wood in the middle. So the Talmud tells us that what it's saying is that a person has to be what's called tohu kabaru. Their inside has to be like their outside. You have to not only look like a good person, you have to be a good person. You don't just dress up like a religious Jew and act like you're not. Right? That you have to be inside has to be like your outside. Now they tell a story about the Ger Rabbi, the Beis Israel, who lived. I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting him in the 1970s. He was the leader of probably one of the largest Hasidic movements in the world, an extraordinary person. So they tell a story about him. I can't say if it's true or not, but it could be true, knowing him, who he was. That a group of people came to see him, and he would greet people, he would meet people, and speak to them. And it was a group, and it was a whole group of people, and they're Hasidim, all dressed up like Hasidim, right, with their long coats and their big fur hats. And there was one after another, and each one would come, and the Rabbi would stand still, and they would proceed by him and wish Rabbi good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. And the Rabbi would say good Shabbos to them. And this one guy goes by, and he says good Shabbos, and the Rabbi says back, Happy Purim. And the next one, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, Shabbos, and it wasn't Purim. Keeps going. So they ask, why did the Rebbe say Happy Purim to him? It's not Purim. He says, because he's wearing a costume. He's dressed like a chassid. He's not a chassid. He's just a Jewish guy who likes dressing that way. But he's not really a chassid. In other words, being a real chassid means something. It means a lifestyle. It means a way of following things. Like, you could be a Lubavitcher chassid, you can be a Satmar chassid, any type of chassid you want. It means something. You are affiliating with a belief, with a Rebbe, with a tradition, with a way of life that has a very serious meaning. Right? If you follow that, a part of the way you follow that is that you dress that way. Right? That's part of it. But if you don't follow it and you dress that way, you're wearing a costume. It's like me putting on a clown costume, right? You're not a clown. I never trained as a clown. I was wearing a costume. Today I'm, Darth Vader. I'm not Darth Vader. I'm me. But this guy's not a chassid. He's a Jew, right? But he's not really a chassid. He's dressing up like a chassid. Right? He thinks he's a chassid. Maybe he'd like to be, but he's not. Right? The Torah is telling us by covering the ark that holds the Torah is a Jew who has a Torah inside of us. Our life is Torah. And we have to be inside gold and outside gold. When you want to be outside, present yourself as a sophisticated, good person, then your inside you have to be a good person. You can't pretend. You can't be what they call a hypocrite. A hypocrite's a very poor expression, but you can't act one way and dress another. First thing is everybody sees it, and it becomes ridicule. You get ridiculed. You know, I remember one time when I was first, heavily involved in Jewish life and in Torah. I was maybe 19 years old, and I had come back to America from being in Israel for a number of years studying, and I was in New York, which I never lived in New York, and I didn't know my way around at all, and I knew I had to get on a bus to leave New York, and the bus was on like 41st Street or 40th Street, something like that in Manhattan. For us to get to it, you had to go to Times Square. Times Square today is a great place to be. Times Square then was not. It was either dangerous or full of pornography. Right? So on a physical level it was dangerous, spiritual level it was dangerous. Right? All you had was prostitution and pornography and drugs, and it was a terrible place to be. But that's where the bus station was. Right? What did I know? I wasn't from New York. So I'm walking through Times Square, and it's a porno shop after porno shop after porno shop, and seedy people, and it's really not a place for me to be. And I'm trying to find this bus station, and as I'm walking through, I look over to my left. I remember this as clear as it happened yesterday. And I look into this store, and it's a pornographic store. As I'm walking by, you can't see what's in there, but you can see what it is. And there's a obviously observant Jew standing inside this store, right, browsing. And I found it was so incongruous, right, that you would have what looks like an observant Jew standing inside of a pornographic bookstore in public, right? People can see him, and just doing that. And to this day, like it hit me how odd that was, right? No, you can have lots of answers to it, right? And I'm not making any conclusions. When I was 19, I made conclusions, but I'm not making any conclusions now. The person, whoever he is. But I see a guy with a long coat and side payas, right, and a big hat standing in there, and I'm saying to myself, how that was shocking that is, to have 20 men who are even Jewish standing in that store. You don't think it wouldn't have struck me, but the one guy did. Why? Because we have a presumption that your actions and your feelings on the inside are going to resemble your outside. In this guy's case, for millions of reasons, right, that I'm not going to be able to answer, he was not the same on the inside as the outside, right? And it was so shocking to me that I remember it till this day, right? That my life, I've seen lots of crazy things since then, but that was probably one of the first ones. And that was so shocking to me that I can still picture it in my mind, seeing that person there. And that was an example of how the world sees someone who dresses one way but acts another way, right? That's like, a policeman speeding. A policeman doing something he shouldn't do, right, in uniform, right? It's a big deal for the police. They do such a thing like that. They get in a lot of trouble because they're not only, representing themselves, they're representing police because they're dressed like police, right? That's why it's so much, you get so much trouble if you dress like a policeman and you're not a policeman, because you're not going to act right. Right? The same thing here. You dress like an observant Jew and you don't act like an observant Jew, the whole world notices. Right? Why? Because it's not normal that your inside shouldn't be like your outside. So the Torah is telling you that it's extremely important. Your outside should be golden. The world should see you as a wonderful person, but you have to be a wonderful person. You can't pretend to be a wonderful person, because if you pretend to be and you're not, and you really act the opposite, no one will let you get away with it. You're going to see it won't work. People find it doesn't make sense to them. That's what that's telling us, right? By the ark being that way. Let's go on. It then tells us on the next page, on 448 and 449, you shall make a cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits its length, and 1.5 cubits its width, and you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. So we're still talking about this same object, right, the ark. And on top of it, you have these things called cherubim. What are cherubim? It probably shows us a picture somewhere. I don't see it here. Cherubim are two what appear to be little children made of gold with wings, and it describes how they look, that sat on top of the ark.
Yeah,
Bottom page 447.
Okay, so you see the two of them there. They're made out of gold. They're definitely not something that we would normally see, because we don't make statues. Right? We don't pray to idols. And it appears like an idol. It appears like, babies on top of the ark in the middle of the sanctuary, right, in the holiest place of Jewish ritual life. And they're sitting on top. They're these two objects. It says that what they actually are is the representations of God and the Jewish people. And it says that when God and the Jewish people are in sync, when we're acting correctly and we're close to God, then these two cherubim are like the picture shows. You see how they're facing each other? Right? Well, you can't really tell. They're not in that picture. They're supposed to be they're facing each other. In fact, it's supposed to be the intimate pose. The two of them are like intimately touching each other. That means that there's a great relationship between God and the Jewish people. Miraculously, these two objects will reverse the opposite direction and face away from each other when the Jewish people and God are not united, when the Jewish people are acting incorrectly. So he will have them reverse away one from the other. So they're not symbols specifically of children. There's a lot of messages as to why they look the way they do, but they are symbolic of the relationship between us and God. And they're there for us to see that it's a message to us. And messages from God are very important for us, because God speaks to us all the time. And this Shabbos, I'm giving a whole talk on that. Right? The whole idea is God speaks to us. And one of the ways he does is he puts these two things on top of the ark, and we see them. And we see that they're interwoven. It means we're on the right path and keep going. And he sees that they're not. We're going the wrong way. We better take heed, because God's showing us by those two, if we don't fix it, he's going to keep sending us messages. And the more messages God sends us, the louder those messages get. Right? At first, like, let's say, you can be somewhere, like a husband and wife can be somewhere, and let's say he does something silly. He forgets to zip his zipper. Right? His zipper came down. Right? So, there's nothing terrible. It's just, it's a little embarrassing, a little bit. So the wife tries to whisper to him, "Hey, your zipper's down." Right? So he shouldn't get embarrassed. Right? But he doesn't listen. So she's a little louder. Right? Or like, how, you kick your husband under the table when he says something silly. You kick him, right, under the table. But he doesn't listen. So then you got to kick him harder. He doesn't listen. So then you use your hand and you go like that. Now people see, right? But they don't know why. He still doesn't listen. Finally you say to him, "Can you stop that already?" Now everybody knows, right? What's happening is that first you send a message. It's very subtle. You don't want to embarrass him. But if he's listening to messages, he's going to hear you, and he's going to stop doing what he's doing. Right? He doesn't hear it, so maybe you got to get a little louder. Well, the louder doesn't help. So now you got to be a little bit more severe. That doesn't help. You got to be a lot more severe. Finally get to the point that you're going to walk out of the room because he's not stopping. Right? That's how God relates to us. God sends us messages. At first, the messages are very subtle, very quiet. You're going on the wrong path. Maybe you'll have catch cold. Maybe you won't feel so good today. Maybe, you'll try to go somewhere and your car won't start. A small message, nothing terrible. Your life is fine. You got your job. You're healthy. But the bus doesn't come on time. Something happens. So you say, "Yeah, those things happen." No, it's not how it works. God's sending you a message. Something's wrong. You have to fix something. You've got potential that you can be a great person, but you're just a good person. Maybe you better try hard, God says. Try a little harder. So he sends you a little message. You listen to the message? Okay, great. You'll never say it again. You don't listen? Now he's going to kick you under the table. A little bit louder. You're not listening? So now it's not just your car that breaks down. Now it's going to be something a little worse. Until finally you're going to say, "Why is God doing this to me? Why am I not so sick today?" Why? Because yesterday, when God made you a little bit, wait for the bus a little bit, you didn't hear that message. Now he's got to make a louder message. He's trying to help you. He doesn't want you to embarrass yourself and say the wrong thing. So he's trying to help you. So he's making you this happen and this happen, this happen. Listen to your messages. If you don't listen to your messages, the messages will get louder. What happens will get worse. It'll get more severe until you finally have to listen. You have no choice. So we have to realize that happens so that you listen to the message right away, so that it doesn't get worse. So you get it right away. It's the same thing with anything. You get sick, right? You take care of the sickness right away, fine. You don't, it gets worse. It gets worse, so worse. A sickness that could normally be cured in a day could kill you. You don't take care of yourself, right? But you have the ability to go and you catch a little bit of cold and you don't do anything about it, and then it turns into pneumonia and you don't do anything about it, and they get water on the lungs and you don't do anything about it, you're dead, right? If you listen to it when there's just a cold and you took a day off, or you warmed up a bit, or you drink a little orange juice, whatever it is that you do, right? It stops. Same thing in the spiritual world. So God sends us messages. So the cherubim is an example of that, of a message that God would send to the Jewish people in the days when we had the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have it today, so our messages come in different ways. But that's one of them. I'll tell a story about how when I was in Colorado a number of years ago, there was a small town outside of Colorado, and that town once had an Orthodox community, and it had died, and then there was a group of people who came who wanted to start a new one. But they were taking a long time, right? They weren't growing very fast, and it was hard, and I'm not blaming them. I'm just telling you a fact, because it was 10, 15, 20 years ago already. I don't even want to say how long ago it was. So they were taking a long time, right? Along comes Yom Kippur that year, and they're still not with a mechitza, and they don't have an Orthodox rabbi yet. And they take out the Torah from the ark, and they're walking to do Kol Nidre in the middle of the room. And one of the guys holding the Torah collapses, and the Torah falls at Kol Nidre. You can imagine this is a pretty loud message, right? Somebody, he was fine, but the Torah fell in front of the whole room at Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur. So you want to talk about a message from God, there you got one, right? So one of the people in the shul says, this is a message. We're not supporting Torah correctly. And the people in that community took it to heart. And the next year, they had an Orthodox rabbi. And 2 years later, they had an Orthodox synagogue. But they could have ignored that message. They could have said, who's the dummy who put the thing on the ground that made him trip? Or, it's a message for him, not for us. Or, what are you talking about, a message? Right? What are we doing wrong? We're getting better every year. Right? But God sent a message. Step it up, guys. So they heard the message and they stepped it up, right? That's what it means to hear your messages. That's what it's talking about, right? That's just a small example I don't want to talk about on Shabbos, but that message is found in this week's parsha also, right? With the cherubim, he sends you a message, right? You go into the temple and you look up and you see the two angels, right? The two cherubim look in the opposite direction. You better fix something so that the next time you come, they're looking at each other, because God's telling you you got to fix something. You don't want to listen to them. So I'll make it that it happens to you. You're going to have a problem at home. You and your spouse are going to have a problem. And you're not going to hear that, now it's going to be with your kids. You're not going to hear that, now you're going to lose your job. You're not going to hear that, you're going to get sick. You're not going to hear that, game's over. Right? God only sends messages to people who listen. And what you really don't want to be is the person who doesn't get messages. Because remember I said that God's not cruel. He will send you messages, right, because he knows you'll listen. But if he doesn't think you'll listen, he won't send them. Because, he's not going to make someone sick because he wants them to get better. If he knows they're not going to listen, that's just cruel. So what you really have to worry about is that when you never get messages, that means God's given up on you. You're not hearing him. And you didn't hear him, you didn't hear him, you didn't hear him, you didn't hear him, you didn't hear him. All right. You're not a bad person, but I was hoping for more out of you. So I'll let you live. I'm not going to send you. I'm not going to be cruel to you. You're going to have a good life, and you'll live your life, and you'll die when the time comes. But you could have been so much more. You just had to listen. That's what they're telling us here. That's what the cherubim tell us. That's what our messages tell us. That's what you hear in your life when things go wrong. Ask yourself, not only physically why it's going wrong, and not because of the mistakes that you do, but think spiritual. What's happening in my life spiritually? Then you'll be able to hear that message, and then messages will stop at that point, and you'll have fixed it, and you won't have to deal with it. and then you'll be a better person because of it. Okay? So, time for us to stop.